Right here I have two RTX 4070 GPUs from Gigabyte, the Gaming OC as well as the Aero OC. Now both cards should be mid-range-ish models of the 4070, which means they should offer some extra features and better thermal and noise performance over the cheaper models. So let's check these cards out, let's compare them to 3 other cards I tested so far, and let's see if they are worth considering at all. Let's begin. The Gaming OC has been around for a long while, so the overall design is pretty familiar as well, combining a mostly dark gray design with a couple of lighter elements. It has a pretty neutral look and it will match most motherboards and other components on the market. Even though the 4070 is a mid-range chip that only pulls 200 watts, Gigabyte decided to pair it with their larger, cooler format, so it is still a 3-slot thick, 30 centimeters long card. It is a few centimeters shorter than the MSI Gaming X Trio and Palette Jetstream, which might be helpful in some cases, but I still think it is wise to measure your case or just double check the specs to make sure it will fit. It is built pretty well with a proper metal backplate, and it does have a few interesting features. You get a fan stop feature that we also saw on the MSI and the Palette cards, but on this one you also get a dual bias switch and an RGB feature underneath the actual fans. Now, you're not really going to see it in a typical case, but if you plan to do a vertical mount, this card would stand out from others. Just keep in mind that you won't see this feature when the PC is idle and the fans stop, so for the full effect, you will have to make a custom profile using MSI Afterburner, for example, to make the fans spin at a low RPM all the time. Meanwhile, the Aero's focus is obviously on the white and silver color scheme. White GPUs are still pretty rare, and then especially so when it comes to lower and mid-tier cards. So it is very nice to see that Gigabyte is continuing this Aero line with the RTX 4070 as well. White-silver color scheme also means that it will nicely match up with both Gigabyte Aero motherboards as well as the ASUS Prime and MSI Edge white motherboards. Unlike the Gaming OC, the Aero card doesn't have the RGB fans, only the logo lights up a little bit. But other than that, it looks like it is exactly the same card as the Gaming OC, with the same PCB and the same heatsink underneath. So it is also a 3-slot thick, 30 centimeter long card with the same dual bias switch, but then with a slightly different shroud. Both cards use the 16-pin 12-volt high-power connector and include an adapter to connect 2 8-pin cables from your power supply, and both have the usual 3 display ports and 1 HDMI 2.1 port on the back, which is exactly the same as the MSI Gaming X Trio, Palette Jetstream, and the Founders Edition from NVIDIA. And what really sets them apart from other models is the 4-year-long warranty that you get if you register your card after you buy it, compared to 3 years you get with other GPUs, and longer warranty is always better. Now, as usual, let's begin with a quick recap of the 4070 chip itself. So the 4070 is about 23 to 25% faster than the 3070, depending on the resolution, which puts it roughly in line with the performance of the RTX 3080. It is a 1440p card, and if we look at 29 games in this graph, it manages to hit 70 FPS or more in every single title without any upscaling, but if you enable DLSS, you get 100 FPS or more in every single game. Now, DLSS 3 also features the frame generation option, which is not really ideal for every game, but for slow-paced CPU bottleneck games like Microsoft Flight Simulator, for example, frame generation can be extremely useful. At 4K resolution, the RTX 4070 does well if you enable DLSS, hitting 60 FPS or more in all 29 titles in the list. But as I always say, if you really care about 4K gaming, getting a stronger GPU would just make more sense. But at its focused 1440p resolution, a 4070 Ti is about 22% faster, and a 7900 XT is about 33% faster, and they both cost $800 or more. So with these custom RTX 4070 cards, it is really important that the price premium isn't too high and the price doesn't get too much over the $600 or €670 MSRP. The 4070 is extremely efficient though, especially when you compare it to the 3080 and the 7900 XT. And depending on how many hours per day you spend gaming and what are the energy costs in your region, this could make a big difference at the end of the year, so do keep that in mind. But let's check out these two particular models and how they perform. Now, in terms of clock speeds, both Gigabyte cards perform a little bit better than the Founders Edition. The Gaming OC tops the chart, but the MSI and Aero are very close behind. Now, keep in mind there is only a few percent between the top and the bottom card in this graph, and just like with other models, there is no memory overclocking out of the factory. Now, technically, these small differences when it comes to clock speeds do lead to small differences in gaming performance, but they're so tiny that you would never notice those few extra frames while gaming. It is again 1 to 2% of a difference and definitely not something that will really add any value to these cards. So yeah, you're not gonna get better performance if you spend more money on a custom card because they're all pretty much the same. While the MSI pulled a bit more power to reach those higher clock speeds, both Gigabyte cards barely show a difference when it comes to power consumption. That 4 watt of a difference of the Gaming OC compared to the Founders Edition is not something that will make a difference on your power bill, and the Aero OC falls nicely in line with the FE and the Palette card. So if you pair these two cards with a nice mid-range CPU, I would recommend getting a good quality 650 watt power supply. That being said, if you pair it with a super efficient 7800 X3D, you could get away with a 450 watt power supply. Or on the other side of the spectrum, if you pair it with an i9 13900K that pulls 300 watts or more, I would go for a 750 or even an 850 watt power supply. So this will mostly depend on what CPU you have or which CPU you're planning to get. Out of the box, both cards run in their OC BIOS and they run noticeably louder than others. But since both cards do come with a dual BIOS, which basically only reduces the fan speed of these cards, you can easily swap them to the silent profile and get two very nice and quiet cards. So in the silent profile, they're a step quieter than the Founders Edition and a small improvement over the Palette card. Although the MSI is the most silent model by a reasonable margin. If you look at the temperatures, I think it's fair to say that the silent profile makes the most sense on both the Gaming OC and the Aero cards. Around 60 degrees on the GPU core and 60 to 62 degrees on the memory are perfectly comfortable, and there is no reason to make the card louder so it goes even lower than that, which is what the primary OC BIOS does. These temps are very similar to the MSI, which ran even quieter, so technically that one is a little bit more efficient, but honestly, both are quite overkill, and any of these coolers is way more than the RTX 4070 chip really needs. So like I said in my other 4070 videos, if you need to choose between all these models, it will pretty much come down to personal preference and price. Now, here in the EU, these two cards are currently listed for 749 euros, which is 80 euros or 12% over the MSRP. In the US, the Gaming OC and the Aero are listed at $670 and $680 respectively, so again, about 12% over the MSRP. And that feels a little bit high, to be honest. At that price, they are fairly close to the 4070 Ti, for example, that is just quite a bit faster. So if you're just after value, I would probably look at MSRP models first because there are plenty of them in stock. But it also doesn't feel that extreme if you really want a nice white card, for example, or you want an in-fan RGB for your build with a vertically mounted GPU, or you really value warranty and you just want that extra year as well. And of course, prices do change over time, and it's only been a few days since launch, so if you need to decide which GPU to get, make sure to check the current prices in your region first and then make your decision based on that. That's all. This video was brought to you by Corsair and their Elite LCD XT coolers. These premium all-in-one water coolers combine excellent performance with a fully customizable LCD screen that can showcase anything you have in mind. With a low noise pump and the AF Elite fans, they can easily keep up with the latest and hottest of processors out there while keeping your system quiet. You can install them on a variety of sockets, including the latest Intel and AMD ones, and once the installation is complete, you can use the iCUE software to control the RGB effects or sync them with the rest of your Corsair gear. Check them out using the links in the description below. If you like this video and you want to make sure you never miss my future uploads, do consider clicking that subscribe button. Thank you all for watching and see you in the next one!